Well, hello again, everybody. This is John Norris at Trading Perspectives. As always, we have our good friend, Sam Clement. Sam, say hello.
Hey, John, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. I hope you're doing well.
I am, thanks.
Good, good. Sam, today I'm looking forward to finishing up our the second part of our two-part series on the dollar and its status as the primary global reserve currency. And, after last week's podcast, I got a couple of people asking me, what about Bitcoin? And what about cryptocurrencies in general? So we'll get on that in just a little bit. But Sam, a couple of things that we didn't mention last week, we did, but we didn't really kind of give folks the true magnitude of the scale of this stuff, is just how large the currency markets are. And it really boggles the mind when you think about it. And back in 2019, last time I can find really good data on it, the daily global size of the Forex market was $6.6 trillion. $6.6 trillion every day passing through currency traders.
Yeah, it's multiples times bigger than the stock market, than the bond market. It's by far the biggest trading market in the world. And I think that's an important caveat to mention when we're talking about this.
Oh, it's without a doubt, it's a massive market that the average person on the street will know a little bit about the S&P 500, probably know something about stocks, New York Stock Exchange, or the Dow Industrials. Then you go down, maybe some folks know a little bit about bonds. Very few folks really understand the currency markets and just how liquid they are, just absolutely how liquid they are, and how pennies or fractional pennies are worth millions of dollars on some of these massive contracts that are being traded literally around the world.
Yeah.
All day, every day, currencies are being traded.
And it's so funny how they're mentioned and looked at by people that know what they're talking about within the Forex market versus people who don't. I follow some people who that's all they do is look at the Forex market. And one of them said, oh, the Canadian dollar is puking today. And I look at it and it's, like a couple penny move in it.
Yeah.
And so to someone in the Forex market, that's a huge move. And it is because of how it's traded and how people are making money in it. I mean, these were huge moves, but, if someone's just looking at it and says, I could get, 80 cents on the dollar and now I can get 81, 82. Doesn't seem like too big of a move.
It's not a big deal if you're in Buffalo and you're going over to Toronto to do some buying and selling, doing some shopping, or vice versa. However, if you're moving contracts of 100 million Canadian dollars, or 200 million Canadian dollars, or $1 billion Canadian dollars, and it moves
leverage.
If it moves a couple pennies, that's real money. I mean, that's the type of stuff that we're talking about. And so, the global foreign currency markets need to have a major or primary liquid currency, and that just so happens to be the U.S. dollar. Due to the size of our economy, due to the size of our financial system, due to the way that the Forex markets have really just kind of developed over time, it has been the primary trading currency for decades. And the only one that comes even somewhat close is the euro. And Sam, as we talked last week, one of the biggest drawbacks of the euro is it's the currency of a zone of country, an amalgam of countries, and not necessarily a country itself. Your thoughts on that?
That, and it's, maybe past its prime, some would say, and, it's had some hiccups, and it's not maybe a young, vibrant currency at the moment. And, a lot of people are looking 5, 10, 20 years out and already asking the question, what's the euro going to look like? Because like you said, it's not just one country, it's not just the health of the British economy or the German economy. It's, okay, maybe they're doing all right, but let's go look further south in Spain and Greece and Italy and some of the Baltic countries. And, they're not doing so well. So what does that mean for the currency when it's a accumulation of 20 plus countries? So it's a little trickier to look at the euro and forecast it than it is for something like the dollar, where it's predominantly, okay, how is the United States, one country's economy doing?
Without a doubt. And Sam, we keep on talking about problems with the euro. We talk about the problems with the dollar, just the sheer deficits that the U.S. economy and government run, and our need to import huge amounts of foreign currency in order to, or just investment We just need to report a huge amount of capital in order to balance our books. Then it really goes down. I mean, then you take a look at the Japanese yen, and that's a country that's declining in population. Its economy is not the world's second largest any longer. Then we get down to the UK, the Canadians, and even the Swiss. And these currencies just simply aren't big enough to grease the treads, if you will, or the ways of the global currency market. So when you take a look at all of the major currencies, it's no wonder why people will have concerns about the Forex market when all of the major fiat currencies have some kind of ding or problem with them that would give some people pause. And Sam, undeniably, in my estimation, that is the reason why cryptocurrencies have become so popular. Your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I think you and I would both admit we're not cryptocurrency experts on how they work, but I think something we can talk about is the sentiment behind a lot of it and the reason why a lot of people are piling into it. And, for a lot of those reasons, which I think we'll break down shortly, it's kind of hard for me to argue with some of them. The attractiveness of something that can't be, just printed away, the value of it, if that's true, if that's what you're selling, that's pretty attractive to a lot of people, something that a few people in a central government can't go and ruin the value of your investment, your cash, your fiat, whatever you want to call it. And so I think that's what we'll probably focus on a little bit more. And I think there's a lot of truth to why people like cryptocurrencies and decentralized finance as a whole. So yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things that one of the big advantages, of a cryptocurrency is the peer-to-peer focus, obviously. And then you eliminate banking fees. There's no wire charge, no international wire charge, no ACH charge. It's relatively instantaneous, no friction on the money, and there are no regulations. Let's face it, if you want to engage in a transaction with someone in Venezuela or Iraq or Russia, you're using a Bitcoin, you're paying in Bitcoin, and you don't have to go through a whole bunch of hoops with the authorities. Or at least that's what the thought process is. So it's understandable why people, particularly in a lot of these countries where there are capital controls, where the government maybe not be as stable, they probably view Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies a little bit different than how we might view them here in the United States. They are truly viewing them as a way to get their capital out of the country, or the way to get their capital out in the ether somewhere where they are not subject to the dirty paws of Nicolas Maduro or Vladimir Putin or the dictator of the moment as a case. Hey, careful now, so, but you're right. But you're right. So, those countries, that's the store of value. Here in the United States, there's been more gradual acceptance of it. I would say people are just kind of like the gee whiz aspect of it in a lot of ways, but I would say it's kind of viewed more as and I could be wrong, viewed more as maybe an investment or another asset class, as opposed to a true currency or even a medium of exchange. And, there will be people that will take great umbrage with that statement and would disagree with me on that. But I would say, by and large, when you're talking to people about Bitcoin and social situations, not experts in the matter, just your general Joe Sixpack, and they're talking about Bitcoin, they're talking about it more as an investment as opposed to a currency or a store of value. Your thoughts?
Yeah, an investment may be a loose word because a lot of them are just buying it because they think the price is going to go up, which I'm not sure that's necessarily, I guess that is an investment, but there's not a lot of thesis around some of these people buying it. It's just, I saw it going up a lot. So I opened up an account and put a little money into it, hope my money grew a little bit. It's not necessarily understanding the thesis behind it and the value behind it. But a lot of people that I talk to in this space, and it's a bet. I kind of mentioned it, but it's a bet against central governments. It's the decentralized finance as a whole and the banking system as a whole, and it's kind of a hedge against that. And I know people who say, yeah, I'm going to put a couple % allocation in this because maybe it falls apart, if it does, you're only down a couple percent. But if the worst case scenario happens and these central governments start to absolutely destroy currencies, that 2-3% is going to actually be a big buoy on a portfolio. And people that I get it. It's hard to wrap your brain around what's happening and the dollars that are being spent, the debt that's being created, and then the Federal Reserve that's buying a large percentage of the debt. And we've talked before about modern monetary theory, and it's already kind of in place right now with the amount of debt that's being bought by Federal Reserve and central banks across the globe. And I think that scares people, and I think there's a fair reason why it scares people. And so the sentiment isn't completely out in left field. It's not too crazy to me to be concerned about the direction that things are headed.
Well, you're right. You're right. But I would tell you that no matter what that direction may be, and I would say you're right. It should be on a negative slope. The U.S. government is not going to not print money. It's not going to not use the U.S. dollar. It's not going to not accept the U.S. dollar as tax payments. It's just, it is the coin of the realm. And so we will always in the United States as consumers have some need for dollars, if for no other reason that's what the IRS takes. Maybe they'll take Bitcoin at some point, but if it gets to that point, we're going to be loath to get rid of our Bitcoin, if you catch my drift, and be happily using our incredibly worthless US dollars. And that's when the Bitcoin or any cryptocurrencies, Litecoin, Ethereum, Cardano, or what have you, that's when that becomes a true store of value for American consumers. But Sam, I would, and taking a look at it, I would say increasingly, I'm more of the opinion that cryptocurrencies might just become another asset class for your portfolio managers, for your investment managers. And as firms like JP Morgan explore creating exchange traded funds and notes, and as we get more liquidity in the cryptocurrency space with places like Coinbase and all of that, there's no reason not to at least examine them when you're a financial advisor, a portfolio manager, as another non-correlated asset class. Truthfully, as maybe, clearly a hedge against the dollar, and something that might be a little bit different than gold or silver or other commodities, things that have been used as traditional hedges. So, it's not that hard to think that, moving forward, people will have 2, 3, 4, 5% of their portfolio in cryptocurrencies in some form or fashion. And it's not that hard to get your brain around it when you remember, and Sam, this has been within my career, that American investors have warmed to the idea of the secondary market for mortgages, so Ginnie Mae's and Fannie Mae's, Freddie Mae's, and even international investments. When my first employer up in Baltimore, Mercantile Safe Deposit and Trust Company, we contracted out with a firm called Dunedin in Edinburgh to manage an international fund for us. And boy, we thought we were really hot stuff because we had an international fund. Now those are just commonplace.
Yeah.
So I would imagine moving forward, having a cryptocurrency or having just sort of a blockchain exposure in your primary investment portfolio, that's just going to become de rigueur over the next 3 to 5 years, in my estimation.
And I'll add something else that I think is becoming more of a, I don't want to say issue, but it's maybe a value add to cryptocurrencies as a whole, is the saying too big to fail. At what point does something like this become too big to fail? At what point is it too entrenched into large companies' balance sheets? Large investment managers have loans out against it. They have deposits with it, whatever it may be. But there comes a point where you can't just cancel something out and without collapsing the system that's built on it. So I don't think we're there yet, but it's becoming so mainstream and so adopted. You're seeing companies like Tesla start to, you can buy your Tesla with Bitcoin. You're seeing that in several companies now start to take payment in cryptocurrencies. And if those are being held on the balance sheet, at what point does that become too integrated into the United States or to the global financial system to say, you know what, we can't have this anymore, instead of saying, okay, how do we make this work? And I think that's going to be the more likely outcome, is how do the government figuring out how this works into our financial system versus just an all-out ban of it.
I think, Sam, I would say particularly with Bitcoin, I would imagine we might be there already.
Yeah, I think we're close. Yeah, absolutely.
I wouldn't say that with all cryptocurrencies, but I would certainly say with Bitcoin, we're probably there. Truthfully, we're probably there. That would cause such a headache if the government would try to just ban it all right now and just lawsuits and what have you. Maybe certainly not all of them, but certainly because there's not a huge barrier to entry. It's very I think it's very easy to foresee a period of time where the governments around the world don't allow for the creation of any additional blah, 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 or try to regulate this. But I think the cat's out of the bag. The Pandora's box is open with this, and I don't think the government will be able to shut it down effectively. I think they're here to stay in some form or fashion. And that's just going to be just another, I guess, really kind of another 4X, but I don't view it the same way as I do fiat currencies from central banks.
Well, I view it most closely to, and I guess this is an agreement with Jay Powell, but sort of a gold alternative into how it's invested in. It's not really a fiat currency. It's not something, if you think it is going to be the future, why would you sell it right now for a pizza or a car or something like that? Same thing with gold. People who are really into gold aren't trying to go out and use it as currency because they believe the value of it's going to skyrocket in the future. And so I think that's kind of, I guess, the best similarity to it in terms of the psyche around how it's bought and sold, especially considering you have a large amount of people who are saying they will never sell their Bitcoin, which is probably pretty similar to a lot of people with gold. They never are going to sell their gold because they're expecting, stuff to hit the fan at some point. So I think in terms of the psyche of how it's bought and sold, for the most part, obviously it's more volatile than gold. So you have people trading it, just trying to get in and out. But I think that's kind of the allurement and the selling point is most closely linked to the gold market.
And Sam, that noise that you just heard is the telephone ringing. Your telephone ringing, people getting ready to yell at you for daring to compare Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies to gold. But I think you're really kind of on to something. And I think you're probably right. In that regard, can you really say that Bitcoin is truly a competitor to the US dollar for global foreign currency dominance? Or is it just another substitute hedge like precious metals would be, or even real estate that's sometimes used as a hedge? And so that's kind of where Bitcoin might be. People might say, it is a threat to the US dollar. But however, what you're saying is Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are more hedges as opposed to a threat to the dollar as the world's dominant reserve currency. Your thoughts?
Yeah, that's how I would view it.
And I'm not sure if everyone would agree with us on this. However, I will tell you, Sam, I think we talked about it. I mean, the cat's out of the bag with cryptocurrency.
Well, you're seeing even more.
Go ahead.
You're seeing even more, government acceptance of it. They're more trying to, I mentioned, the solution may be more, how do we fit this into our current mosaic versus how do we ban it? Because you're seeing, people figuring out, okay, how do we tax this? If that's the question being asked, that doesn't sound like something that's going to be banned in the future. And then you have Gensler, who's been pretty pro cryptocurrency, I would say. Mm-hmm. And he's going to be the guy in charge of it, really, and in charge of how it fits into that same mosaic. And that's just how it's trending. I think that's a pretty clear signal. If the questions are more around how do we tax this and what do we do with this, if you're asking how you get the government gets their piece of the pie, they're probably wanting to keep it around.
Piece of the pie or ounce of flesh. I think that's might be a better analogy here. So. If that is the case, again, I don't see it threatening the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency. I just think it's just another form of reserve for central banks and treasuries around the world. Not necessarily we're going to quit buying dollars. It's just we're going to add cryptocurrencies to our underlying currencies. We're still going to trade in US dollars every day. We're still going to trade in euro, but we're going to have gold and Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, what have you, also on the balance sheet in some form or fashion because here in the United States, we have something like 250 million ounces of the shiny stuff involved out in Kentucky that we consider part of our reserves as well. But we don't really view gold as a threat to the US dollar as a reserve currency.
Right.
So there you have it. So, Sam, I think we're kind of back to where we were last week. Don't think that there is any fiat currency out there that is going to be an immediate threat to the US dollar for any foreseeable future, truthfully. And then when you take a look at cryptocurrencies, I think that they're got to be viewed kind of a little bit differently than the fiat currencies, and they were going to be a hedge as opposed to a threat, in my estimation, and the currency markets themselves. Your thoughts?
I agree.
All right, Sam, one of these days we're going to have to trade perspectives. One of these days there has to be generational differences. There has to be
one of these days.
One of these days. There are generational.
Maybe it's David Bowie or something.
The fact that you can't pronounce his name correctly suggests that there are generational. Bowie is in Texas. Yeah.
Well, that. There's your answer.
You're going to get Bitcoin fanatics calling you up, just upset that you're comparing it to gold. Now you're going to get some classical rock fans calling you up going, "Are you kidding, man? Are you kidding?" Now that if you're listening, that is one of the generational differences. Sam loves country music. That's what he listens to. I listen to classic rock and 1980s college music. Sam, you ever heard of The Cure?
Nope.
The Smiths?
Nope.
Smithereens?
Nada.
All right. Well, we've got a lot of work that we have to do on Sam Clement here, but guys, we always love to hear from you all. So if you have any questions or comments, by all means, please let us know. Drop us a line at tradingperspectives@oakworth.com, or you can leave us a review on the podcast outlet of your choice. As always, if you're interested in reading more, hearing more of what we've got to say, by all means, drop our website, oakworth.com, and take a look underneath the Thought Leadership tab for all kinds of fun and interesting information. Sam, I'm going to give you another shout to add some value here today.
That's all I got.
That's all I've got today, too. Y'all take care.